Well, welcome, Matt Fuller.
Hey,
Good
Sherry,
to
thank
have
you.
you. Good to have you. So, Texas Bee Supply Monthly Magazine is starting I'll say we're doing a new platform, and you are our premier guest for the February issue, and we're excited to have you here. What we want to know, because you're an expert in the beekeeping world, and for those that don't know Matt, Matt Fuller is a PhD that is a professor at Sam Houston State University. He owns and operates, along with his wife and family, Fuller Farms out of Montgomery, but you have a farm in Weimar. I know that. I've heard that many times.
Yes, ma'am.
And you do bees, you do beef, you do pecans,
A little bit of everything.
little
Yep,
bit of
a little bit of
everything.
everything.
Hey, and that, I think that's awesome, because it's just the epitome of farming, isn't it? Really, it's the epitome of farming.
Lots of good memories for my family. So
That's right. And I was impressed with your amount of hives. 88 hives in 3 locations. I respect you for that. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. So, Matt, I'd love for you to just start and tell our beekeepers, what does Matt Fuller and Fuller Farms do to get your bees ready for spring starting in February? And you got the floor, and I'll jump in every once in a while.
Sure. Thank you, Sherry. And please do, because a lot of what I've learned in beekeeping, due in large part to you guys, James, Sherry, and the folks at Texas Beekeeping. So thank you for the opportunity to speak a little bit about what we're going to do to get ready for spring and the beautiful weather that we're going to have in the spring. Of course, there's not going to be any windstorms, and there's not going to be any late frost and none of that horrible stuff that we all dream about, right? So
right, that's right.
So usually our months, because beekeeping is a smaller part of what we do on our farm. I shouldn't say smaller, but it's just one part of what we do. And what I do with local farmers throughout Southeast Texas. We're traditionally thinking of February as a planting month in all other areas of agriculture. In cows, you're thinking about what vaccinations and what medicine, and are there calves coming, and pecans. You're not doing anything. You're looking for that first little break of leaves coming out. And same with hay. You're not really doing much. That's really not the case in February in beekeeping. February to me, February and early March are kind of those times when everything starts waking up for bees. So this is a time when you're getting real anxious. You've been through the winter, ready to get out there, and you want to crack open that hive and look in there. I really would just tell folks, just wait and see what we've got for some warm weather coming, hopefully later in the month. And that's when things are really going to break out. So in breadth, it's still, we're on that verge of getting ready to go. So one thing that I do, that I spend my time for beekeeping doing, is I look at flowers, I look at plants. And I think every good beekeeper, every good farmer really should spend their time looking at the minute details of plants. So I look for things like, when are our elm trees going to bud out over here in Southeast Texas? That's one of our first real big indicators. Just yesterday, I was walking through a field, and of course I had my head down looking at the ground, and I saw little bluebonnet plants. So, wow. I'm thinking, well, that's going to be beautiful here in a few weeks. So,
right.
Looking at those kinds of indicators of what's right around the corner helps me make some decisions about feeding. And that's the major kind of thing that I think as beekeepers we've got to do in February. One of the big control points or junctures in the season when a lot of things can go really well or a lot of things can go really wrong. And so if you want, we can talk a little bit about that, Sherry.
Sure, go for it.
So, a lot of times I tell folks you have to have a strategy for feeding throughout the winter. And the first couple of years of beekeeping that I was doing, I'd get these pretty strong hives, and I'd get them going into the winter of strong and numbers well built up. I wouldn't take much honey in the fall. I think I'm doing everything right. Okay. And then you come to February and you go and you look at your box, and there's an empty box. There's nothing there. And so I started to do, like they say, do an autopsy, figure out why that's happening, what's going on. And my joke is that I've lost bees in every which way possible, right? You know, I've starved them out, they've frozen, they've absconded, they've gone every which way possible. To me, the way that we manage that is in February, the rush, the idea is that, you know, if you don't do something to feed the colony right when it starts warming up and they start getting natural nectar flows, that queen's going to start laying, and there's not going to be resources there for her to lay with. And that's a pretty bad situation for them. They start, that's when they abscond, that's when they starve, things of that nature. So it's not uncommon for you to see starving beehives in a time when flowers are plentiful, right? Because they're just starting up. That's that transition period that we need to help them through.
That's
the way we mitigate that is we do feed in the winter. We feed a 2-to-1 syrup, sugar to water syrup, and then we also do provide honey, pollen patties later on when we're ready for them to break out and get going. We see that as kind of a just a little extra supplement to help them navigate this time.
Well, that's all good, very good points. So when you're seeing the elm and the ash in our area start to, because we're not far geographically apart where our bee yards are, you're starting to see your bee activity really start to ramp up, and that's your indicator to, I need to go out and I need to really make sure that they've got what is required in order for that queen to do what she's going to do, whether we intervene or not.
Exactly.
That I think that's probably one of the most poignant statements we can make as experienced beekeepers, that for new beekeepers to keep an eye on what your stores were going through winter and being ready to truly supplement, because holding back is not a benefit to them, not this time of year. And you've said starvation, I think 3 times now. That is a key that needs to be drilled into all beekeepers' minds, that you're not going to want to be the reason that they didn't survive. Definitely.
Well, I can remember a couple of years before we took this philosophy, it would be so frustrating that we've done all this work in October and November to get the bees really built up. And then you get to February and you get so close to when they're on their own.
Yeah.
And the little thing like, you know, not throwing them a little sugar water every once in a while set me back.
And blow it right there, right? So you feed, how do you feed? You feed internally on top high tops, or division board, or area feed? What do you do?
Well, so my answer to that question is I feed to match my goal. Okay. And what I mean by that is here in Montgomery, where I live, I do keep bees here just for enjoyment, right? I just keep them here to, you know, have some bees around, make a little honey on the side, enjoy watching them pollinate my garden, things like that. And so here, when I have just a few hives, I do feed internally. I use the division board, the kind of black
frame
plastic.
feeders, some people call them.
Yeah. And so when it's easy for me to just throw my jacket on, mix up a little sugar water, dump it in there, and I'm gone, that's how I prefer to feed. However, when we get to our larger apiary out in Weimar, we get to our bigger spots that I'm working with folks, it's really tough for me to drive, 2 hours to get there. There's no sugar out there. You can't buy sugar out there. So you got to buy it here and take it with you. So to me, it's just a lot easier to do open feeding. Now, we use modified bucket open feeders, 5-gallon bucket open feeders that we tip upside down with holes in them. But what I've found is that if I'm going to do that, okay, it is a choice by my choice that I've open fed. Sure, I would love to go around and fill up every one of those. I just don't have the time. But I have to be okay with all of the ramifications that leads me to. And I have found that if I do the open feeding, I better be ready to have a few weaker hives robbed out and attacked, basically. Yeah. So, there are some pluses and minuses to that. I save time, but I have to be okay with what I'm getting. And so it's just kind of a trade-off.
Well, I'll use that as a segue. So you said weaker hives, and of course, robbing is a huge aspect in February, end of February, starting of March, because resources, although nature appears that it's providing them, really is not keeping up with the explosion that's going inside of our hives. So how do you identify a weak hive, and what in your bee yard, what does Matt see in order to take action to either combine, or I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what do you do and what are you seeing that makes you take action as far as a weak hive in February?
Sure. So certainly numbers of frames. We go in and every once in a while, on a warmer day, we'll just kind of peek at what the number of frames that has bees on them, right? Now on a warmer day here and there, I might take a sample out of a frame and actually look at it. It's got to be pretty warm for me to want to do that. Certainly not like the great freeze event of 21 that we had.
Right.
We weren't checking bees then, but we didn't lose a single beehive in that freeze. We did not lose a single one. We did lose them the weeks afterwards, and because they were coming out of that, and everything that had already started to bud had just gotten snapped back, and so now there was really no nectar, no available resources for them. So for me, it's number of beehives, and you can get, bee frames. You can get a really good estimate, even on a colder day, mild day, of just sitting at the front and seeing what kind of traffic we've got coming in and out. So if I start seeing a little bit more activity, that's when I'm going to say, okay, hey, you might need to go get your suit on, go get your jacket on, do a little bit more thorough investigation. And to me, my just kind of litmus test is I really don't worry about a beehive if it doesn't have less than 50% of the frames it should. Now, what do I mean by that? I heard you speak the other day on another panel about the bee to volume ratio. And so there may be a really weak hive that maybe only has, I don't know, 2 really good frames full of bees, 3 full frames of freeze. It's really weak. It's limping along. And I wouldn't want to put that in a big old full deep, right? I might squish that down and keep it in a smaller space. It's easier for them to warm. It's less for them to defend against like small hive beetles when that starts coming on. Things of that nature. So those are some of the, not just indicators, but some of the actions I would do is try to consolidate them down. If we do have to integrate in, of course, one of those queens is going to have to find her blessings elsewhere. So,
right.
And so we do the newspaper method of letting them kind of integrate in slowly.
Right, and that's a good tactic. We've done that for many years. It is awesome to deal with trying to decide which queen, even though, because in the winter is not a good judging time, and really prior to them ramping up. So it's like, well, this one's pretty good. We've been known to combine weak hives and try to let those queens duke it out and try to see if those 2 weeks will make a solid hive. Often they kind of will overcome some issues, but typically what we see is that there's underlying issues that are causing that weakness. And typically that was a going into winter and a beekeeper fault. And we're just as guilty as the other nearly 4,000 beekeepers in Texas right now, hobby beekeepers in Texas right now, is that keeping up with Varroa and making sure that's under control. So I'm going to use that as another segue. So do you, when do you start testing for Varroa, or are you a Varroa treater, or what is your stance on that?
I am a Varroa treater, but we do it only in kind of the more aggressive Varroa situations. We have a really neat strain of bees here that we kind of lucked into that I really love, and they're naturally hygienic, kind of keep everything in check on their own. By that I mean I've never really on a few of my hives, I've never really had more than about a 2% maximum Varroa count, so I feel really good with that. once I start getting in that 5, 6, 7, 8, I start thinking, hey, I got to do something.
Right.
So for us, I've tried, again, like I said, I've tried it all. I've tried every sort of, strip, every sort of chemical. I've tried the oxalic acid treatment. I don't have to do it often, but if I have to go to one, I use either oxalic acid or hop guard. I've been known to use hop guard before, and those tend to work. I'm a little hesitant about hop guard. I'm worried about building up resistance, mite resistance, but I don't have to do it often, Chari. And
That's good.
my main reason, I'll tell you, the time that I started feeling like I was a little bit better than a novice was when I started realizing that I can't do any of that. I can't do my tests for Varroa. I can't do my knowing how much I'm going to have to expect for feed, all this stuff, until I start keeping really good records. I know we've said it time and time again, but there's just no good way around it. My system is I use ear tags from cows.
Yeah.
I number the hive, so I've got a consistent number all the time. I put that ear tag on the hive, and then I just keep handwritten notes. I used to try to do it on a computer, but I just got down to where I just would write out in my own little shorthand system what I had done, the date I had done it on, and things I might need to do in the future.
And that is, and I'm so glad you said that, because that is the key to successful beekeeping. Many times over the last 17 years, we've done programs on record keeping. I've done it a couple of times in the magazine as well in the last 19 issues. It is, and for those new to beekeeping and those that are even, let's say, 4 and 5 years that just don't feel like they've ever reached that aha moment, record keeping can be the absolute caveat for all of it. So however you do it, it sounds like Matt does a way better job than James and Chari, but what we do is write on the top of the lids, and it may look like this on top of the lid, but we can put it there and write it, and it's there. And then we will take back the more important purchases that we need to make. We'll obviously carry those notes further into the house and carry forward. But that is a very, very good point, that that keeping notes made your difference in Varroa treatment.
Yes,
your methods are obviously organic, one an acid and one just an organic essential oil, basically.
Right.
Those are both good treatments, and it's good to hear that you are taking precautions for that. Requeening is probably something you've got in your arsenal to keep that good lineage that you are touting over there.
Yes, ma'am.
Requeening.
We also find that helps momentarily break the brood cycle.
You bet.
And doing that breaks the Varroa life cycle. And then, we also do some very limited. I don't do it very often, because if I do care about the lineage and the genetics, I do on occasion, if I get a really bad Varroa situation, I will take a frame of drone comb out and try to freeze it. The reason I'm hesitant about that is to keep those genetics that I like, I got to have drones as well. And so let's not shortchange the men in this situation either,
Right.
They get relegated to the freezer quite often. And I think that's a concern we have to watch out for. But if I do have it, you use the metaphor of an arsenal. Really, for Varroa, there's no one way treatment that's going to work every time, every day. You really need to have a kind of a multifaceted approach in dealing with that. And so, to me, it's a combination between breaking that brood cycle, oxalic acid, and then if we needed to, maybe some freezing of drone frames, things like that. So
that's a good strategy, and it sounds like that you have it down pat. So it's end of February, and your hives look pretty good. Are you going to make splits for March as soon as you can get queens?
Certainly. So one of the things that I would tell you as a beekeeper you should be thinking about in February is your plan. Do you want to grow? Do you want to reduce the number of hives you've got? You know, you had people asking you at the farmer's market for honey and you sold out all the time. Are you wanting to grow? Okay, so you got to have in your mind what your goal for that year is. This is the season of New Year's resolutions, January, February. And so you got to have in your mind what you want to do. And if that includes growing, you know, I start looking at consistent temperatures. I don't really look at dates for my beekeeping because that can be really, you know, from year to year, that can be any day
Absolutely.
that
Absolutely.
it's going to be. So for me, I start looking at really consistent 70 degree days, really
Right.
good, nice, warm spring days. Trying to avoid some of those days when we're going to know that we're going to have a good run of rain because we're doing our own beekeeping, our own queen rearing over here, and that's helping me defray some of my costs. So I need to have mating possibilities coming in and out. So you know, that's some of the things that we're looking for. But when we do set up for splits, you got to start backing up. If you're going to do splits, you certainly need the woodenware to put your splits. You need to start having that stuff prepped. I have been caught several times before where, as you could tell, where, you know, I want to do splits, but I don't have all the stuff. So I got to rush out and go buy it. Right. So
yeah.
a little
You're
bit
the
of
only one that's ever done that, Matt. Not.
Fortunately, I know good folks that sell that stuff.
Yeah,
Right,
you do. You do. Well, that's that all sounds great, and I think that we can all glean that from your approach that you're paying attention to what nature is throwing out at you, and you're reacting. You're not waiting for nature to be your answer. You're actually being that beekeeper. That's good to hear, and I think it's wonderful that you've embarked on doing your own queens because. It can become cost prohibitive when you start getting into 88 hives. One thing I would just add on the when about splitting, and that we have found over the years that I think you're probably going to say, you've heard us say this, that you got your production hives and you've got your work hives, you know, that you're going to split and try to grow your bee yard. We want to have honey as well. And if you're making a split too late, you're going to be a little bit behind the 8 ball on getting your honey production. I think that's what you're referring to as far as what is my planning, what's my goal? Am I growing bees this year? Am I growing honey? So that's a very good point to make to folks that you can have both, but timing is very critical in order to, you want to get those queens ordered quick and you want to get your splits done as quick as possible.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's really tough on the bees if you are trying to do both at the same time. If you're trying to do either one of those two philosophies at a time when it's not well matched for that. For example, I've known people that start the year saying, "Hey, I'm going to grow, but I want to get a lot of honey."
Right.
Sure, it can be done. You know, it can be done. You just also have to weigh out what are all the inputs you have to put into that system to get them there. Maybe it's more queens, maybe it's additional feed, maybe it's additional woodenware. Sometimes it gets cost prohibitive. So.
It does. So the last thing I want to do to wrap this up, because this has been really great, you've given us some great information, is what is the best advice that you can give a beekeeper bringing hives out of winter? If you were to just have one trick pony, what would that advice be?
In this time frame, the single biggest piece of advice I would give is to know when your bees need your help and to help them. Okay, so know when you need to feed them sugar and or pollen, and not let them get to the point where the queen is sensing that nature is ready. There's flowers, they're bringing a little bit of pollen in, but that queen is getting the sense that she's ready to start laying. And there's no reserves, nothing in the hive for her to do that with. Mm-hmm. She needs the pollen, she needs the nectar, she needs all that coming in. So if you can really plug yourself into their equation at the right moment, you're helping them avoid the situation where she starts laying and then there's a collapse because there's not enough resources.
That's
And
good.
that, to me, in this time frame, plug yourself into their equation to be a part of the solution.
I can't say it any better myself, Matt. It was great to talk with you, and I thank you so much for being a part of Texas Bee Supply Monthly. We enjoy your articles, and don't think that you're not going to be in another one. So we're going to have
Sherry,
you back.
thanks for all you're doing, not just for selling good quality products, but also for educating people. I don't think the state would be in near as good as a shape as it is in the bee system as it would without you guys. So thanks for all y'all are doing.
Thank you very much, Matt. And we appreciate your help.
All right. Have a good one.
You too.